Welcome to the live stream, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host today, Bumpy McSquigums. I'm joined by Cupogoodness and Tiny Disaster. We're going to be doing our game club, where we battle it out and we talk about a game.
Clubs with game clubs.
Papers, please.
So no game clubs, or large clubs, or
No
nightclubs,
No clubbing.
or nightclubs. No clubbing at all. No clubbing people. No clubbing in general. All right, so Twitch. Okay, papers, please. Yes, that's my pick for the games club, which is more or less a book club where we talk about our individually bring up some of our favorite games, have the others play it, possibly have folks in chat play as well. And so that's where we're at. We played Dust,
Elysian
Tale. That was last month, I believe, in July. And yeah, that turned out to be a really enjoyable experience, both in playing the game and getting to discuss it afterwards with you lot. So let's keep it going today. Let's discuss some papers, please. This game is by Lucas Pope. It's on Steam and a few other places. I actually think it might be on consoles now.
Yeah, I grabbed it on iPad as well.
It's on iPad too. Yeah, obviously it makes a lot of sense. This game can work on those things. The interface is really interesting, actually, to think about how they would do that on controller versus. I think the touchscreen works like really well for the interface. So congratulations. This is the short description of papers, please. Congratulations. The October Labor Lottery is complete. Your name was pulled for immediate placement. Report to the Ministry of Admission at Greston Border Checkpoint. An apartment will be provided for you and your family in East Greston.
See, I have a problem with that specifically, because the apartment's not provided for. I mean, there's one there, but we have to pay for it. So how's it provided?
Expect a Class 8 dwelling. Well, it's provided in terms of you are given something that you can pay for, I guess, versus not having anything at all. So you and your family, this is the dystopia we're in right now. An apartment will be provided for you and your family in East Greston. Expect a Class 8 dwelling, which I imagine is not super great. And then that is actually the opening lines of the game. That's not a marketing. That's not marketing copy at all. That's actually just the opening volley of the game. So that's really an interesting choice by the developer to say, I'm going to just post the opening paragraph of my game into it. It also suggests they're really confident in the premise of their game. Yeah. And why not? They have 47,675 total reviews, overwhelmingly positive at 97%. So that's pretty amazing.
So just a few.
Yeah. I'm not trying to just gush about it like there's nothing wrong with it or there's no problems with it and stuff. It's just to point out that what kind of game we're talking about, and just like we talked about with Dust, which Dust was a universally basically appreciated game as well. There wasn't too many complaints about that game. Congratulations, the October, we did all that already. The communist state of Arstotzka has just ended Arstotzka, which I think is kind of the equivalent. Somebody said Russia, but they said actually it's more like an equivalent of a Yugoslavia when that country was running and stuff, and something that's Russia adjacent, but not actually in Russia, not not a nation the size of Russia for sure. So your job as immigration inspector obviously is to control the flow of people entering the Arstotzkan side of Greston from Kolekia, I think it is, among the throngs of immigrants and visitors looking for work, and hidden smugglers, spies, and terrorists, using only the documents provided by travelers and the Ministry of Admissions primitive inspect, and the Ministry of Admissions primitive inspect, search, and fingerprint systems. You must decide who can enter and who will be turned away or arrested. So what's really neat about it is that it's all kind of takes place in, well, more or less one single interface. There's two really important interfaces. There's the resting interface when you have completed a day where you decide if you're going to spend money or maybe not spend money on your heat and food for your family based on how much money you made in the day prior. Basically, it's always sort of a struggle for survival to keep it kind of above water. And I feel like even when you take care of them, a lot of times they can still. Well, no, you have to click I'm sure you guys saw. You have to click the little toggles to make sure that heat and food is given to your family. Otherwise, the struggle begins.
And your son is clinically or chronically ill. Apparently, 90% of the time.
The son gets sick a lot. It's very true. And then there's the other interface, which I find to be a really clean, simple, awesome interface of. There is basically a booth you're in, and you have a table to the left and a sort of first person view table in front of you, or I guess I don't know how to describe it, like something that's like more in your face. And so, people come in and the table on the left, they're basically looking straight at you and saying, here's my stuff. And they put it down there. And you can visually sort of say, okay, I can grab what you've given me and move it to my right-hand side here where I can now open it and look at it like I'm actually reading it, as opposed to just sort of seeing this small passport, seeing this small entry ticket or ID card, et cetera, et cetera. And on day one, they decide they're going to play it safe. They're just going to let patriots of the country come in that were outside the country, so no one but people that were born from that nation, or at least have citizenship. I think it's basically born in that country.
Well, that's where you have the passport, so yeah.
Right, I guess if you somehow gain citizenship, yeah. But I mean, that's probably not likely given the situation prior to that. 6 years the border was closed. That particular checkpoint anyway was closed. So you get through that first day. I think you reject one or two because, of course, or maybe like two or three because they're not from the homeland, the motherland. They have to be rejected. There may be one that's just wrong for something. I can't remember something else, but basically you make your choices. It seems fairly cut and dry, fairly easy. And you go home. Usually you make money that day by like maybe $10 or something like that. You have enough to take care. Still have like $5, $10 remaining. And then you go to day two. And that's when things get a little bit more complex. They introduce okay, we're going to let foreigners come to our country now. That's okay. As long as they can provide a valid passport, they're allowed
from the right spot.
Right.
City.
Right, and that's something that it becomes a little more complicated because you go, oh, there's an issuing city, and they can fudge that. Apparently,
that's where your rule book comes into play for the first time, really.
Right, and so the rule book essentially is there's all these I mean, what we're describing here are like actual physical pieces and documentations. It's called a dystopian document thriller, and so it's really about handling the documentation that you have in front of you. Which, by the way, I feel like, before we get too deep into this, I don't want to go too deep into it, but just as a recommendation, if you're like, whoa, this is way too much, it's really simplified documentation. If you think about how this would really go down into Border Patrol and how the amount of red tape and documentation that you would actually have to go through versus what they have. This is a game mechanic. He's really done a good job of making this, while challenging for sure. It's still a game mechanic. It's not supposed to be something that is so not just overwhelming, but yet you have to dive so deep in the minutia that it's not fun to do. Like
it doesn't you don't want to the game isn't designed for you to hate your life like an actual Border Patrol person would hate their life. Oh, this is so boring and repetitive, and I just have to do this again. That's not fun.
Honestly, there'd be 30 extra pages of things that didn't matter involved, like most of the time that you'd have to probably sift through in those situations. So it's just a simplified version of that, and it's a great idea, I think, for like a gameplay, for like an indie, gameplay mechanic, because it's something that it's real, it's realistic, it exists. It gives you a lot of insight on what that situation is like, both from one side of the table versus the other, or the booth. A lot of the interactions are very realistic to me, very how that would be. Yep. For people who had stood in line for a really long time, and those kind of things. I thought it was funny, some of the YouTubers and the reviews I saw for the game, they were kind of offended when people were mean to them, and I was like, well, they've been waiting a really long time and they got rejected half the time. You know what I mean? Like it would be brutal. It would be brutal, right, for those people.
Well, it gives you an idea too. Like you're just looking at a few small details. I mean, it might start seeming overwhelming as you go, but it's a few small details, and then you have to imagine that other folks, that are doing the job legitimately, they have, like you said, so many more things to do, so many more things to look at. So kind of gives you a little bit of an insight as to why and like how many just small little things could possibly happen, could go wrong, or the ways they try to pull the wool over your eyes or pull a fast one on you type situation. So yeah, it's I think it's a very interesting take on things.
I like the power of choice as well. Like there's times where you're like, I kind of want to let this person through, like, or, there's situations where you're actually put up to a choice like that, where it's like, maybe it makes sense for me to go against the letter here and let them through. I was
never good enough at my job to like be able to take the risk.
Yeah.
Well, I was already too many citations deep.
Other interactions. I think it's a nightclub or a exotic women's club that ways women keep coming through. They always seem to have legitimate passports. They're always giving you their card and being like, "Come by later, honey," and you're like,
the pink vice."
Yeah, the pink vice. That's right. Yeah. So that. There's just some interesting interactions going on. A lot of people kind of, once you get to, I think, day 4, you have to start doing audio transcript. More or less, you have to get the reason why you're crossing into the nation. Like when I go into Canada, I have to tell the border why I'm going into Canada.
Because I want to. It's not a reason.
What I'm doing there, right? Like and
how long you plan to be there.
And how long I plan to be there. That's all really important. To Canada's pretty strict actually with their border for the most part. Like in my interactions with it. So and that's basically where you get to on day 4, and you actually have an audio transcript that I think it's a little bit harder to understand how to use that, but you can bring back up what they said before.
Yeah.
And you can like look over that and you can do the discrepancy check, which is a really cool mechanic that's built off of the board that we were talking about earlier with the tables and the 2 tables. There's this red button at the bottom right where you can click and say, okay, I'm going to highlight 2 points of information that do not match, or that something's up, something's weird about this, or something. Mostly, it's just that they don't add up, like, or they don't match. So
it's handled really nicely. Of like, because even when it did match, the way the person would phrase it, of like, "Oh, I'm here for 2 months," was not going to be the same as the visa being for 8 weeks. Like it matches, but they were more natural in how they phrase things. Of like, it's not always going to be, I say the thing that's on this piece of paper.
Yeah, like a couple weeks turns into, or a few weeks turns into a month, and I'm like, is that real?
They do give a citation for the one who says, "I'm here for a few weeks," and it says 2 weeks on their thing. So that's a little bit of a gotcha to me. That's a little strict because it's
like that is really, like that. Those are the rules. Like a few is 3, several is 7. I'm set there.
It definitely stands out if it's a design choice for the art of the game, then I understand and respect it. But it's really strict, and I think for a gameplay mechanic, that's pretty rough on the player. But it's probably because he's trying to, like you said, Bumpy, have some gotchas in there where even the best players are like, I did not even know you were going to try to get me like that with this, the height is definitely one of those gotchas.
That's Cup's favorite guy. He's here.
The gender. Oh yes, I gotta look over on the stream. Yeah, he's great. So he comes. I think he comes by at least 3 times, if not more.
Yeah, more. He does.
Yeah, he keeps trying to, and he keeps evolving his situation a little bit at a time. It's almost like hopelessly evolving it. I love when he finally gives out his passport, which is not this time. The second time he brings his passport, it's clearly just this made up passport.
Yeah.
Stamp here.
It's so great.
Yeah,
it's so good. I almost one of those days I'm going to stamp him through. I swear, that second one, or maybe that first. I don't know if you can let him through there's no possible way because you can't.
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing.
Like, But the second time, you could almost certainly send him through and get a gigantic citation for that. Like, but he seems harmless enough, but I don't even know. Like, he might be like one of those terrorists or other things that are trying to get through and just kind of try funny business on you.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? Is that you have like multiple times you have terrorist attacks coming through. Some of them are your fault that you let them through. Other time they had somebody jump the barrier. That wasn't on you.
You have to arrest people sometimes because that they're in that situation, and you have to close. You have to like shut down the booth, and they actually get like locked inside of it with you, or you get locked behind a thing as well, like like a double metal doors kind of situation. So that's very interesting. I don't know if you guys got to try that mechanic, but that is always there.
Yeah.
With that switch on that top right side of the left of where they're standing in.
Detain or whatever.
Yeah, detaining them. So it is a really nuanced, completely hand done. There's no procedural aspects of it really. I think it's all, like story. The story wise, it's it's bit by bit, completely hand set up versus some. This could be a cool randomized kind of experience as well potentially. I think they do have an endless mode.
Yeah,
but I think that's still a thing where you're trying to accomplish however many you can within a day. It's not like you just play endlessly, which I think would be a cool Zen mode. Would be like
Zen about this game.
Well, the Zen mode.
I know what you mean.
So in CSD3, nothing's Zen about that, right? Nothing's necessarily Zen about the quick-served games. But Zen mode is essentially like just play this game and there's no time limit.
Yeah.
Like so
just be accurate. Essentially.
So I would love that part of the mode because I actually do like to take my time before I know, I like the game changes when you memorize, the certain aspects. Like day one, you could memorize that, Bumpy would memorize that by probably playthrough 2 or 3. So, he would know, he wouldn't have to necessarily think about it. They point out how you can actually, there was, or one thing I wanted to mention was, on day 3, which is the day with the tickets, I think, for the foreigners. They have to have the tickets to get in. There's one who presents their passport, and they don't have a ticket. Mm-hmm. And you can outright deny them right there. But if you actually interrogate and ask them about it, they present their ticket. They have it. And
I was about to do that.
Yeah.
I point out the discrepancy, and I'm like, oh, okay, you're good.
But you wasted some of your time doing that. You know what I mean? But you got it right, like for them. You know what I mean? You made it right for them. Like who knows what they would have done if they get declined? But once you stamp it red, they can't do anything. They have to go. Like you know what I mean? Even if they're mad about it, even if they hate you or whatever, like they're not going to be allowed to basically protest at that point any further. So it's a really interesting interaction there. That it's like saying it's telling you like be thorough. But also, like, I'm like, but I want my family to live, and I've only talked to like 6 people, and the day's almost done.
And you get what, like $5 or $10 a person?
I think it's $5 an interaction. Yep, and it's approved or a correct approval or deny.
And it has to be before the time limit because if you help anybody afterward, you don't get paid for it.
I don't think so. Yeah, and then of course there's day 2 gets cut short. There's other days that get cut short for various reasons. Usually attacks or something that makes you basically shut down. It's a bleak game. It's a game that is like built around like a bleak atmosphere, but is sort of like you kind of forget it when you're in the moment. And you're just kind of enjoying the in the moment kind of stuff. But anytime you take a step back to think about some of the people you're talking to or the situation as a whole for you or the country or everything that's going on, you're like, this is so bleak. It's so sad. It's like this is so everybody's just barely getting by. It feels like what I mean, barely scraping by, including you.
Yeah, I wish you could warn people at the border of like, are you sure you really want to come in here? Like,
it's like it's not.
This is not a good place.
Glory be, guys, glory be, but it's not so great.
Well, even later, like you can choose to, or like when you choose to, like when people are making mistakes or trying to get through when they shouldn't be. They give you the option to detain them, or maybe it's automatic at that point. And then there are people who are like, just give me back this thing. I'm sorry, I won't do it. And then they just get taken away, and God only knows what happens at that point. It's like,
Just look at some of the reviews. Me walking up to customs at in the airport. Wow, it's just like Papers, Please. Yeah. So this game was originally released in 2013 on
12,
Steam. Yep. But ended up going, I think they have a publisher that I know he didn't have originally when he released the Steam game, and I imagine the publisher helped them get obviously additional releases on and like exposure, but also I think they probably helped with porting to the console side and probably mobile as well, which is really cool. It's really cool that this is, to me, this is like one of those games where I personally feel like there's other games that it's up for debate, but like games like Duskers, a few other games like that we represent as well that are kind of like evergreen. You could play them 10, 20, 30 years down the road, and they're them, so they're not really going to be aged in any different way. Their aesthetic was already something that, if you want to talk about it, was like an older aesthetic that they were using when they released in the 2010s. They were using aesthetics from like the 80s or from the maybe the 90s for Papers, Please. So like early 90s, but like Duskers is like basically based off of like the original Aliens design of like the drone design from Alien, or from Alien, I should say. So like I also just feel like the gameplay mechanics, when you haven't played them for a while, feel really awesome to get back into and like get to play. And it's just like, oh yeah, this is a really enjoyable experience that, even though I know it's not like that's probably the wrong way to say it for Tiny Disaster, because I know it's not truly like this like, oh, joy thing. But as someone who enjoys games and gameplay and mechanics, and something that just kind of the loop, learning about like good gameplay loops and things like that, I feel like this one has a really challenging, but one that makes you want to dig deeper, try harder, really get it right.
I'm gonna do it,
and feels good.
I'm letting him in with his fake passport.
Oh no!
Let's see what happens.
Oh yes. Okay, great.
Oh,
let's see what he says.
He dropped something for me.
All right, you're the best.
The Orbston
Here,
token.
Take this.
Yeah, he real mad. 5 credits just for that one.
Big citation. You got a penalty assessment for that. Yeah. Oh, but you had more. You had other ones. Okay.
Oh yeah. I definitely screwed up a bunch this one.
That could have been a warning the first time, but he's through. That's great. So who knows it? I imagine he doesn't show up anymore once you let him through. That's really interesting. And because he's a reoccurring character because you keep declining him normally. That was like the normal aspect of it. But there's 20 different endings. I think 7 or 8 of them, or maybe 12 or 14 of them, you end up in prison.
Sounds about right.
And a lot of times it's because you aren't good enough at your job, or you let your family die, which is a prisonable offense, I guess, in this game. If you let your family die, you go to prison. And if you help, if they know that you're working against them in any way as like a good person, because this is really dystopian, and doing this is a lot as you get deeper into the game, you realize you're rejecting a lot of people, that are a lot of good people.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. They'll so like the best ending is often you ending up in jail, but because you are a good person, I guess subjectively, best ending. But another best ending might just be that you're just a good little bureaucrat in every single way possible, and you get promoted or something at the end of the game. I never got that ending yet. Yeah, I never got the ending where you moved up one pay scale level to $6 instead of $5, like a thing. Yeah,
it's like, here, something do like this thing. So you'll totally be able to survive it, and it's gonna be great. Your family won't die because you can't feed them every week, and it's weird that you have a daily what's the word, a daily rent payment. Who gets paid daily? Are you living in a motel? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, and that's either that's either like a what do you call it, a suspend your disbelief for the mechanic, or if you want to be a diehard for the developer or for the art, you're like, that's just the dystopian world they're living in, man. They take rent every day. It's probably just totally made up, right? Like, it's like, this doesn't make any sense, but the world does suck. Like, they're like, he wants you to understand the place that you're in is not good times for anybody.
In my head, I kind of explained it as like, okay, we're calling it day 1, day 2, but it's more like every month, because otherwise they're changing their immigration policy at an alarming rate. So
Yeah,
for me,
no.
it was more of like that. We're checking in once a month kind of thing. The rest of the month is kind of.
That's true. If you just put it in your head, if you suspended your disbelief and you're like, this isn't happening daily, there's no way it could. That makes a lot of sense too, because you're right. These kind of changes and there's adjustments that they make and how things evolve would not happen within a 24-hour period. Every like change that they make, it would take multiple days, weeks, months, potentially even if beyond that.
No wonder those people are pissed. They bought a ticket yesterday that was completely legit, and the next day they're like, no.
Yeah, that's so brutal, right? And then there's other times where it's like, maybe they just understood, like they got a ticket and they thought that maybe they couldn't get to the border in time. You know what I mean? Like maybe they got their ticket and then something that held them up.
I couldn't get here before now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so brutal. Like, and you have to like reject people that like are like, you ruined my life. Like as they walk off, and you're like, okay, like, this is great. I'm having a good time.
Shame.
There's that person who's like, I haven't seen my son in 6 years or something like that, and you have to reject them. It's like,
and she doesn't have the right thing.
Hey, you don't have to reject them, but like I said, like if you're a good little bureaucrat,
check again.
You probably will be.
Check again. These numbers don't match. Check again. Oh God. That's pretty good.
Do not arrest me, please. Just deny my passport. I will go away.
Yeah.
Out. Nice. So yeah, there's just, it's like, yeah, awesome. No, it's just crazy how, that's cool. Yeah. So that was a great example of the detaining mechanic. Because sometimes you think it when the sheet goes down, it can't come back up. But no, they just they get your guards now. And as you can see, that's like day, I think 4 or 5, where the guards are like extra thick. Yeah, like the guards are extra thick in the front. They originally have 1 guard, I think, start in the way back. Yeah. And now they have 5 guards.
What? Oh. Okay, I gotta pay attention to their responses. All right. It's like, what?
Incorrect visit duration. Yeah, response. Yeah, that's getting into like the minutia, like that is, if you talk about minutia in this game, which I don't think there's too much of, but that's as deep as you get. It's like you're like, I have to really pay attention to what they're saying, even as I'm looking through their documentation.
Yeah.
And how can I do this in 10 seconds?
Yeah,
or less. And it's great. I think there's just so much to play with. I kind of wish that the first few days, especially as it gets harder, you had a little more leeway to kind of play.
And you could build up a little bit extra money for the times where it's not so easy.
Yeah. But I feel because of the art of the game, I get that the pressure needs to be on the entire time and such. I get it. But as far as it would betray the art a little bit, which I think a Pope is against. Like pretty intensely, but I would love to play the game in a way that you could, accessibilize, make it accessibilize. But yeah, like make it more accessible and play it at different paces. Have a build up mode, like you were saying, Bumpy, where it's going to get hard, but you have a chance to build up ahead of time for when it does get hard. So it's almost like in that regard, it's kind of roguelike-ish. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like build up your defenses, get yourself ready to go, and then as you get into the deeper dungeons, you have to use both obviously your skill, but also the allowance that you built up, right?
See, that one didn't make any sense, right? The guy's he says, "I'm here to visit," and then his thing says transit. So I call him out on it. He's like, "Oh, yeah, just passing through." So then I say no, and he's like, "Nope, that was he was clear for going through."
Huh.
What?
Well, I guess transit is necessarily, means that they're moving through the country.
Yeah, but he said he was there to visit. That was what his transcript said. That's what he told me.
Oh, huh.
Yeah, that was a weird one.
Huh. I don't know. Yeah, I have to, because they're probably there's enough fan base on this game and like people who play speed throughs and stuff that there's likely really all the points that you run into that you go, that's weird, are probably debatable points that are somehow somewhere on some forum out there. They're like, this is why this is the way it is, or I don't think it's too bugged or anything.
Why do we have no cup? What happened to him?
Oh, I don't know. I'll turn off my camera, turn it back on. I can
see
me
for a second a couple minutes ago.
Yeah, I did that for the camera situation.
Uh-oh. He broken.
I'm there, at least in my spot, like my little guy.
Yeah. Hey, little guy's there. See.
Hey, little guy. Yeah, I'm still in the Discord, but yeah, you're right. I looked over at Twitch, and I'm just little avatar.
There we go.
Little avatar me.
I had to move
right.
my other screen for some reason, or my video for some reason.
Little guy.
Little Cup
he could
hath
carry
returned.
The day. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I imagine Little Cup could have finished the show well enough, but yeah. So it's oh, there's a nudity option. I forgot there was nudity in the game.
Yeah, eventually you got to scan people for contraband because
that's right.
Right around now they do an explosive thing.
It gets. Yeah. I don't even know if Tiny Disaster got to that point. So it gets really intense, like where you actually have to like body scan people, and obviously
they have a knife strapped to their back or drugs or whatever. Yeah, it's
and you see like this low poly animation, back fat and things like that. So it's interesting.
It's not a big deal, but I figured on stream, we can turn it off.
There's just a lot going on. That I think makes the first playthrough really unique, and probably like the first several playthroughs until you get to where you're really comfortable with the knowledge of what's going to happen and who's who. What? It's almost like I don't know. It's like eventually you would start matching the eye. Your memory. It's like a memory game. Eventually you're just going to start like over time. Without the long term, you're going to start matching things up and saying, okay, I know who you are. I know who you are. I know who you are. But there's a lot to it, so it wouldn't just happen right away because, like, obviously there's like a lot of days. I think that I have to look at the campaign again, but I think there's like some splits going on as well in the way the days go. But I can't remember. No, it just goes. I can't remember how the progression goes with the campaign now in the actual days. I have to look at that. But yeah, I mean, like once it gets to the passport. The entry permit, that kind of stuff. Now you're trying to match like 4 or 5 additional things that you didn't have to before, and you're going, hey, I thought I had a handle on this, and now I'm like spinning my wheels. So it's a game that I think,
because his wife comes right after him and she doesn't have the the card, so you let her through or you don't.
Right. So this is right that you get a chance to make a choice here. Essentially, the game gives you the option to stay within the rules of the game, or make your own choice. Which I think
I beg you, please,
again,
please, I'll be killed. Sorry, ma'am. It's not my job to care. No, it would normally be my job to care. But in the game, it's not my job to care.
You have doomed me. It's like so. Yeah. And it's like, and so I feel like Pope really doesn't necessarily need like say that you have to be a slave to the mechanics. Like you can make that choice to let him through. There's going to be a penalty involved and stuff, and you have to absorb that. And so I think it points to the fact that a lot of people that are really into games would naturally be inclined to go the bureaucratic route. Because it's the most pat on the head, good job, here's your treat route. Whereas like making those tougher choices for people, you have to basically absorb those blows like a fighter and keep going and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting in that regard. I think it's crazy as you get later into it that there could just be that 20 different endings in a game like this. It's very interesting.
It is quite interesting. Trying to think if there's anything else to really point out or say about it.
I wanted to touch on the sound design because, like, even though it's not that complicated, just the way the voice through the like amplifier, like calling next, like it all just like fits the tone really well without being overly complicated.
Yeah,
like it just kind of adds to that bleak feeling of the sound is kind of muffled and bad and the theme song's just very intense and you're not about to have a really good day.
Yeah, it's just the slow, continuous sound of the wind. If you really listen to the sound design around your actions, which is basically you being on the loudspeaker, alarms going off, right? Things like that. Very immersive. I think Tiny Disaster mentioned maybe before we got started.
And kind of a feeling of just oppressive in general.
Oh yeah.
Super,
super feeling that. Yeah.
So
Congratulations, we have a work lottery. You're like, this is so oppressive right off the bat.
Super.
You know what I mean? Like,
You're like, work lottery?
You're like, work lottery.
What
Like,
does that
right
even
off the bat,
mean?
like, it's so oppressive. Well, I mean, like, the word lottery is such an interesting term just in it. As I grew up, like, obviously the original term I knew lottery for was money related, was winning the lottery based, in America. And I think there's probably some form of lottery in most countries, but like, yeah, like you'll put in some small amount of money and you could win a large pot of money, that kind of stuff. But we did a play in my teenage years called the lottery, where it was like the exact opposite, where if you won the lottery, you were stoned to death. Like a bunch of people just gathered stones and threw rocks at you so that the corn grew better the next time the harvest went down. And the whole play, it's like a 15-minute, it's a short form play. The whole
Short story.
Yeah, short story that you could do as a play. I should say it is not necessarily, it wasn't designed for theater right away, but theater has picked it up and used it a lot. You don't know exactly what the lottery is unless you listen to the hints, basically, until the person is basically thrown into a pit and they just throw stones at them. But until then, it's like, oh, who's gonna win the lottery this year? Oh, the harvest is gonna be so great. You know what I mean? All this, you're like, oh, great, it's gonna be awesome. Yeah,
it's basically a random chance to be selected, whether that's win, lose, or in this case, die.
Right. That's the true definition of the word lottery, and it's sort of lost on at least American kids like myself, back in the day, kids like myself who grew up, and that word had been sort of changed. Kind of similar to Amazon, maybe. Like, that word probably meant something different than what it means, like, to a lot of people now in America. So
it was a large woman,
tall
in stature and super strong,
or still an actual real area of the world. Yeah,
the Amazon rainforest and so on and so forth. The Amazon River, which we've learned recently is in Brazil.
Right, but everybody knew that except for one person in our group, apparently. So that was fun.
I think it was me.
Yeah, in Jackbox, you got to call him out. It's okay. He'll be okay. He'll be okay on this stream.
It's because I found a shirt club.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot. I think it evokes a lot. It brings a lot out of people who play it in terms of, the general feel of the bleakness, the oppressiveness, the sort of dystopian situation, not sort of, but total dystopian situation going on. And then you're also like, but yeah, that was really fun. Like, I think I had a pretty good time playing it. While it was not completely overwhelming or too much for me, which I think ultimately is sort of the point, is that...
So what would Papers, Please again look like to you?
The second game?
If there was one, what would it look like to you? What would you do differently?
Well, I don't know. I think that the design is for like an artistic release. It's probably, I wouldn't do a sequel, right? I think it's probably right there good. I don't think Pope would want to interrupt it with a whole lot of...
That's a question, just a hypothetical. Say you said a new one now instead of the...
Well, like I said before, I think that there could be a better progression for a player from the gameplay perspective. But again, that's more about gameplay and less about the art. I think his point was, it's really difficult to be a border patrol officer under these constraints, under these restrictions, under all this stuff that you have to take in and figure out. It's really hard, and it's supposed to continuously get worse and harder and more difficult based on these new codes, these new things. Give me one minute, please. Yeah, of course. All these different aspects of the game where you're just like, this isn't getting easier. This is getting like more nuanced, more difficult. Like, my job is getting harder. No one cares, like, at all. Like not the people paying me. That my people pay me don't care. People who come through the checkpoint don't care, and are probably more annoyed that they have to produce additional documentation and all this. So you just at some point, the overwhelming feeling, I think, is one of the points of Pope's efforts here is that it's not supposed to ever be. You're not supposed to be smooth. You're not supposed to feel like you've got it all figured out and stuff.
Yeah, you never get comfortable.
If you do, that's great. You play the game a lot and you figure it out. Again, it's not a procedural game, so they can't throw gotchas at you that you already know are coming from a mile away because you played the game 1,000 times. But that changes the game, and at that point, and I think, look, I think the developer's fine with whatever if people go that deep into it on that many playthroughs through. It's just a different sort of thing at that point. So I, as someone who like loves in design great gameplay loop, I would give the player more to chew on for longer, but I wouldn't necessarily make it like, this never ending or really, really elongated thing. I just think that it could be, it's like a 4-hour experience at this point if you really, grinded it out and made it through it, which is, you're not going to probably beat it in 4 hours the first time because you're going to get too many citations. You're going to, or you'll beat it in the way that it's like you basically got put in jail because you couldn't feed your family, or you'll beat it in the way that you lost the game essentially.
Yeah.
Like, so that's one of the endings, right? Is that like the family didn't or one or all your family are dead and now you're going to jail. So yeah, it's I think I love the idea that you would have this. You would have like we talked about earlier, almost like a roguelike feel of, okay, I am in control in these early levels because I played this game a few times and I feel really confident now that I can get through these levels that I would probably make it procedural. I probably wouldn't the second game. I probably wouldn't make it story like every person is the exact same order, right? Handcrafted, right? Because I feel like that had already been done really well in the first game, and I feel like let's change this up then and give the player something different here, where they get like more of a again sort of endless gameplay loop experience that you can offer through this procedural thing, especially if you do it really well, right, Bumpy? If you have good procedural stuff where you feel like every interaction is keeping you honest but also is fair, where the player goes, yep, I screwed up with that interaction, and that's why I got the citation. Ultimately, it wasn't something that it was like a huge gotcha in the game, unless I didn't know about something yet, which I guess is like the only gotchas that you can do is how Papers, Please initial gotchas are, is that you did not know that you had to pay attention to that specific piece of information that was more or less just there, not necessarily mentioned or highlighted.
I think they could do a combination, and maybe they already have, I'm not entirely certain, but a combination of, procedurally generated along with certain set pieces. That might already be how it goes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah, I agree with that.
Where you have your favorite buddy with the fake passport, all that stuff coming through.
Yeah, I mean, times. And there's certain things with procedural, if you think about it, like you could put certain instances at higher percentage rates and others at lower percentage rates. So you could put that guy up at like an 80%, appearance rate on round 5 or something like that. So maybe he wouldn't show up every single time, but he'd show up most of the time in that case, in that kind of thing. Or, like you said, you could just go straight set piece, say 100% of the time this is going to happen around all these other things that are happening between 10 and 80% of the time, which is kind of cool. It's a cool way to play with it because it gives you a lot of flexibility while still being able to not get too lost in the procedural stuff and miss out on a lot of that, really the emotional stuff that you can bring about in set pieces, like a lot of connections and really cool things that you can do that you can not necessarily do with the procedural generation. The procedural generation allows for organic, weird, amazing things to happen with players, though, that they come up with their own stories from something that they've never experienced before based on the procedural generation. So that's cool, too. I think both aspects could be really cool. And I'm going to go pitch this to the publisher or Lucas Pope. No, I don't think they'll be interested. But I do think that would be a cool sort of endless aspect of that game that allows for a little bit more patient play and deliberate play at first. Whereas I feel like the deliberate play is out the window pretty quick in the initial game because you have to be like, you don't feel like you can check everything really slowly, like or at least deliberately, like I was saying. You feel like you have to really just scan things quickly and say, fine. Almost like a Cook Serve Delicious at one point, how it gets, Bumpy, where you're not really going to be looking at the ingredients anymore, but just saying, I'm going to look really quickly at what I have to do and then do it. Like, that's kind of how it feels after a while. It's like, I know that there are 2 different passport numbers that I have to confirm are the same at one point, right? Like on 2 different documents. And at some point you stop slowly looking at it and you just go, they don't look any different to me at a half, millisecond glance. Like, so I'm going to just say that's good and keep going. So that's kind of cool. But I also love the aspect of that person, there's that absolute person at the border who is not rushing at all.
Yep.
And they're not, this is the non-dystopian aspect of this, is that they don't have to, get X amount of people through the border to pay for their,
they get an hourly wage.
Money. Yeah. Right. They get the same money regardless and stuff. And maybe they just want to do their job really well, right? Yeah. Like, they want to make sure that they get all the aspects right. I would like to play the game that way at some point. You can, but you're not going to like how quickly the game probably goes downhill for you, based on the outer outskirts and stuff. So that's kind of like, again, that's not really my complaint about it or anything like that. It's just something that I'm like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Like, if you had that's like, because we talk about accessibility all the time. And one of the things that I think about is how you could make your game more accessible while not sacrificing the initial, the vision of it. Which I think, what we talked about probably sacrifices the vision too much for Pope. Over some of the sequel stuff, some of this different kind of aspects. It just ruins the vision a little too much. However, I like playing games, and it just sounds like a fun game. Like what was some of the stuff that we were talking about there? That would be what did you call it? Papersers, please, or papers,
please again.
Again, that's right. Yeah. That's good. I like that. It's better than 2 for sure.
Tiny Disaster. Thoughts on a sequel? Would you want to see different, added, changed?
I'm curious to see, because this came out in 2013 and it was such a big deal in the indie games world, of are there people who have been inspired by this, who have since put out their own games that take this similar mechanics or the general idea and do something different with it? So rather than a straight up sequel, what's out there that kind of feels like this, has some of the same ideas. So I'm curious to see that.
Well, if you think about it, it's a really artistic take on a sim. It's very much like Lawnmower Sim or like Power Washer Sim. It just happens to be you're doing this job, or Cook Serve Delicious is like a sim as well, like for a line cook. So to me, this falls in line with what sims can be, right? Like sims don't just always have to be. And I think actually, before I get going on this, I think pointing out that Lawnmower Sim and Power Wash Sim, I think Bumpy will agree with me that aren't those. I mean, they capture the realistic aspects of it while still simplifying it to a point of enjoyment, and not just this is gonna be really boring. I don't have to empty the bag of grass if I don't feel like it. I don't think Bumpy in Lawnmower Sim, you don't have to stand up.
There's upgrades and things you can get where you just back up and it automatically does it.
It's all auto.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think there is ones where you do have to manually do it. I've just never done it. So
that's interesting. Yeah. So I like, but again, that's accessibility, that you have both options, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really great idea and stuff. And so I like to see more games that take the simulation aspect of like a lot of things that we do in real life, or real jobs that maybe we as whoever we are don't experience a lot of these jobs. We're not going to, right? 99% of the jobs out there, the three of us are never going to experience. Even if we did a new job every year of our life, all three of us for the rest of our lives, we'd still not cover, most of the jobs that exist out there in this world. So it's kind of cool to get those inside looks into those spaces, while also not being super boring or frustrating, or in a way that you're I don't understand this a bit. And there's actually some games out there like Zachtronics games where people are I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm trying to build a factory, or I'm trying to connect things like something to do with chemistry here, and I'm an idiot. I think a lot of people feel like that about some of these games, some of these higher challenge games where you're I'm having to do something that's based on, a real life, process that has been developed over thousands of years in certain cases and stuff. We're talking about chemistry or electronics, the way electronics are built and set up, and there's games out there like that. So what I would like to see maybe a little bit more of is look at how Lucas did this in the artistic way he did. I still feel like it's basically a sim in terms of, if you think about what the simulation would be for a border a border patrol, clerk, that makes a lot of sense. That like the way that that's set up makes a lot of sense in terms of the mechanics and the table and the space. But at the same time, because of some of the art choices, sound choices, some of the decision making in terms of the story that he's trying to put out there, it's not like a straight simulator at all, right? It's a narrative based, with all the weird feels that you talked about with the oppression and the dystopia that we talked about, and the other words that I can't remember right now, and all those kind of bleak, the bleak feeling of the game. That's really cool. And it also points out that you don't have to go super hardcore realism graphics to capture that experience as well, which I think is really cool. I think should encourage developers who may not have huge budgets that are still interested in trying to translate some real life process into a fun video game mechanic. That is possible without having to, have the Power Wash or the Lawnmower Simulator graphics that are so just like, popping and really good next gen kind of stuff.
So I went and looked up games that, if you like Papers, Please, there's one called Not Tonight, where you're a bouncer for nightclubs. So you have to check people's IDs, and you're trying to become a UK citizen. So you want to do a good job. There's one, No Umbrellas Allowed, where you're running a secondhand shop. People are trying to sell you stuff, and you're trying to look up to see if what you're buying is actually worth what they say, because you don't want to end up, you're trying to run this little business. So if you buy things, you're going to get your money back. So it does look like there's death and taxes. You're maybe death. You're trying to decide who gets to continue living.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's lots that have been kind of similarly.
Yeah, I feel like the word I haven't used yet as well is these are management games, right? Like you have to manage things to make them work, and so it is a simulation game, but ultimately you're trying to manage a situation. And some simulation games you could just automate situations, whereas obviously in Papers, Please, you're not automating anything; you're going through the whole process. So it is more of a management game in that regard because you're managing the individual situations as much as there's there's a game we did for Arcen called The Last Federation where you basically put in what you want to do and then you say simulate and it does it and then you get the results of that and you react accordingly and you go from there. So that's I don't know that's I wanted to mention that because it's kind of like there's like that wording, simulation and management, there's a little bit of nuance with those things.
Things I think would be cool to see, or I don't know, maybe it wouldn't be.
Maybe not.
Well, for one, I understand why it's in there, and it fits for the game and everything else. I really don't like the secondary part of the game where you never make enough money, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
That just bothers me as a gamer in general. It's just no matter how
totally
good or bad you do, and then your kid's always randomly sick and all this other stuff. It's I don't particularly like that. I think it could have been maybe fleshed out a little bit more. And like you said, I agree with a bit more of slow balls in the beginning to, little easy light pitches to, build up a little bit of revenue. And then it can, start ramping up the difficulty, and then you start making less money, you're making more mistakes. I think it would be an interesting, like I said, cool, but maybe not exactly cool thing to maybe if you beat the game, you can add into the code if they did a randomization with, set pieces that go through. Maybe you can add in names that you want to see pop up. You can do you can create characters essentially that will come through.
Cool.
So you could have you beat the game once, you get 4 extra characters. So you can put your friends in the game. That's always an interesting, fun, easy thing that a developer could do. Again, don't know if you want to in this situation, but
yeah, we did that for obviously Cook Serve has that opportunity to do that with customers. We've done that before on a few streams where we took the pictures of
you had mods
and pasted them basically over the customers of the game that would come through. And so the I guess the subscribers and mods and other fans of these streamers got to play the streamer got to play this game with their fans and stuff in the game, and they didn't really realize it until it was happening. So it was pretty cool.
Yes. You should make that available for everyone. Just saying.
cool mod, right? Like, yeah, or a cool in-game kind of thing to do. And that would be. I have to see how the customers look in CSF. I actually don't know how. Though I imagine it's going to be the same as 1, 2, and 3, but there are some differences in Forever so far in terms of mechanically. So we'll see. I'll have to see if it's the same, because that would be a cool thing to implement in the new game, of course, right from the get-go if we could. But I have to convince the production team, which is it's a feat in itself.
Now, I know in Papers, Please, you eventually get some booth upgrades, like being able to hit spacebar to open, which isn't much of a help, but to open your interrogation mode. I don't really know all the different upgrades you can get, but it would be nice if you were able to get certain upgrades and it would automate things, and that those upgrades would be a little bit easier to acquire. So, for instance, instead of having to always click on next, maybe you can set that to automatically do it. That could be an upgrade, and you could either flip a switch to make it automatic or not. Just like small things, which again probably defeats the point and feel of what they was originally going for, but just to make the gameplay itself a little bit easier. Simple things like that I think would help. And I don't know what else I would do if I were to throw in a sequel. Like I said, I'd either get rid of the family aspect altogether or flesh it out a bit more. If you have a little bit of a bit better build up.
I needed the family aspect, otherwise, there's no tension. That learning to do a mindless job really well is not what I would play a game for.
Well, I would add that making it more like making that side of the game more like an Oregon Trail experience could be cool. Because you have the 4 people. So like Bumpy was saying, having more fleshed out mechanics as opposed to just instead of just having, just to see where they're at constantly and have to react to that and hope you can go faster the next time around. Maybe there's just more options and more, individual things that you can do. Maybe there's more individual things that can go right or wrong for them. Maybe there's more like chance cards, right? Like that pull, as opposed to just always they're good or they're not, or they're heading in the wrong direction.
Did you ever get to upgrade your dwelling because you're a class 8 apartment or whatever it is? Did you ever get to upgrade that?
Not that I know of, but I didn't play through as much this time when I played it 6 years ago. So there may be that aspect that I just don't remember. But I thought you always were just in the class 8 dwelling. I imagine at some point, like you said, there is an ending where you're a good little bureaucrat and you get to go either get a raise, like a really just menial raise, or you get maybe like you said, maybe a class 7. Maybe we're rolling in the ritzy class 7 dwellings now. I love dwelling too. You're in a dwelling. Is that good or bad? It's
go back to your domicile. What?
Yeah, dwelling doesn't sound like the best description for a place to live in, but yeah.
All right, any final thoughts on Papers, Please, before we close it down?
I'm so glad we did this. Because I've had it forever. I wanted to play it forever. I knew the gameplay was going to be really well done. So really glad I played it.
That's good.
Well, I'm glad you feel that. Well, I'm glad you feel that way, because it sounded like you were pretty stressed about it most of the time. So I'm glad to hear that you had.
But in a good stressed game way. It's.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to your game because I believe it's the opposite, pretty anti-stress, and we'll be doing that. So. We'll be doing that in September. That will be a short hike for anyone's interested in playing along with us. We'll be basically the next month. Playing a short hike, which is not going to take that long, but whenever you get a chance to play it, we'll be discussing that probably middle of the month, next month, or wherever we can line it up. I know that we have a mini schedule lined up for now. And we also have some things to discuss behind the scenes as well, because we have some clients coming in that are asking us to potentially change the active time that we're currently doing this based on just them needing some of us during this time. So will be something that we'll be figuring out as we go. That doesn't start till September, so we have a couple weeks to figure that out. And a quick self promo for myself, or self plug. We announced today that our game that was released, Cooks Are Delicious 3, was released on last Thursday on Epic Games Store as a free week promotion. So you still have 24 hours if you're interested to get that. It's going to end tomorrow at I think 8 a.m. Pacific time. and we announced today that we eclipsed 5 million claimed copies of Cook Serve Delicious 3 over the last week on Epic, which we feel is a really cool thing. We obviously know that not all 5 million, getting into the minutia of it, we understand that not all 5 million people are going to download, load up, play, etc. But even a small percentage of 5 million is freaking amazing. And that's so cool for us to get that to happen for us. So I'm really proud of Vertigo, the whole team, myself and David, who really worked hard to get that deal done and in place. And now a lot more people are aware of the Cook Serve franchise as we move forward. And it's something that, as David pointed out, which I agree, 5 million is a number that we can use on the business side almost forever. In conversations that we have with folks, this is a really strong, cool thing to be able to refer to going forward. So awesome results. We did obviously get an upfront payment on that I can't disclose the amount on, but we did get an upfront payment for that. And then in addition to that, we get, as an indie, super proud and happy to get our game out to, 7-figure people, especially when it's like 5 and not just 1, which 1 million is still would be amazing. So we didn't expect that. We're really excited about that, and end of self-plug for me, but I'm really, I wanted to mention that because it's something that is going on right now. So if anybody was interested in picking up the free game, that gave me that end to brag about that. So that was
I saw it pop up, and I was very excited.
We're really pumped up about it. We'll see where things go from here. We're definitely getting a lot more. We're touching the part of the internet that I'm like, because like it's like when you start to reach this point on Twitter where you're like, oh my god, now we're reaching parts of Twitter where it's just madness and all that stuff, and nobody has anything nice to say. But that's probably a good sign to some extent. It's just a thing. It's just the reality of the situation in some extent when you get to those levels of exposure. So
yeah, if you're not upsetting people, you're not well known enough to matter, right?
Often it's nothing about the game itself. It's just about like some of the partnership and aspects and things like that, and some diehard fans of. There's I guess there's a console war going on the PC side as well, which I kind of knew, but I didn't know it was still raging. There's some people there.
Oh, you mean Epic versus Steam?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
People are
just like
babies. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love Steam. Steam is our bread and butter, and they always have been. But them just being the outright monopoly of a platform that doesn't necessarily require it to be, right? Like I understand. Like the PC is not built to be a Steam thing. Like PC is meant to be a lot of different things, right? Like
the thing that everybody's most people or a lot of people are super anti Epic Games. My thing is, look, competition's great, and if it gets Steam to change its policies and not, we'll say gouge. I mean, they're as big as they are, so maybe they're like, well, we've earned this, whatever, but not 30%. Just everybody gets 30% unless you do incredibly over the moon well. Then they work with you a little bit for slightly less percentage. I mean, developers already get screwed so many times over by various different things taking money out of their pocket. With Epic Games, it's 12%. I mean, that's maybe too low, but it's definitely better than 30. So
they're doing things where they're trying to compete with Valve, like nobody else is doing. That's one aspect, and another one is this free, aspects that I think some developers do, but obviously Epic or some storefronts and publishers do. But I think Epic obviously has the cachet to get some really big names, obviously, and they have. And I think the key is that I've been in the camp before where I was like, I really like my Steam library, I really like everything lined up. And Bumpy was someone who was like, but you're missing out on really, really cool opportunities here to get
just clicking really another EXE
for free, essentially, a lot of times, or for very cheap,
or a year ahead of time, right?
And I think that's where Epic is really competing right now, is that they're like, we're not just giving you through free Steam keys. We want you to use our launcher. We're going to try to make it a better experience. A lot of people have complained about it. I think it's improved over time. The storefront and all that launcher, and I feel like it's just gotten to a point now where, like, I wouldn't be able to play a dozen or so games if it wasn't for going through Epic. And I don't just mean because of their exclusivity, but I mean because of the offers that they put out there and that you can take advantage of, that you're just not going to see on Steam. So Epic's being different than Steam, and that's why they're competing with Steam, because they can't just be the same. You can't just show up and be the same as Steam and expect to compete. Like, you have to earn it in different ways. And so that's what I think Epic's doing now. They have a lot of money and they're throwing it around. Not necessarily as much as they were right at the start, but they're still doing that and they're still pushing hard and looking to establish themselves. And I believe at this point they have become the second to Steam, which is kind of interesting to say because Humble, GOG, those guys have been around for a really long time. Those folks have been around for a really long time. And not to discredit what they've been able to accomplish and do, but I think, in terms of what have you done for me lately in the current state of things in 2022, I think it's Steam and Epic and everybody else beneath it and stuff like that. That's not to say that Epic is bringing in standard sales like Steam is. It's just not. We did a big sale on CSD2. We're seeing okay numbers from Epic, but nothing that would suggest that, oh yeah, these guys are competing 1-to-1 on the sales ratio together and stuff. Epic's still climbing that ladder, still trying to get there through subscribership, essentially, through commitments, through the products that they offer and stuff, for enough people to go, you know what, I do want to get that game. I will come over to this side and check this out.
It'll be interesting to see where it goes, like looking at Netflix and how they were kind of the monopoly there, but now the Disney Hulu combo has more subscribers after just 3 years. They weren't the first one to come in as competition. They just had a different strategy and managed to overtake Netflix because people just got used to, I guess I'm not going to be able to just use one platform.
Epic's the first platform that's come in that actually had the money and the cachet, so to speak, to actually do something, as opposed to the other ones that really built themselves from the ground up, and power to them. The grassroots efforts that they made to get to where they are today is remarkable. But they never had these, $100 million of budgets to work with, to throw around, and woo developers, woo partners, and be able to go from there. A
lot of Disney had the money to actually compete,
right? And
they could skip a lot of the building that other have to do.
And that's a great maybe mini discussion for another day. Is what powers could that be are out there that maybe could come into games that could make a difference, because that's what's going to happen at some point, I imagine, is if we ever see any kind of real competition to Steam, is that someone with or some company with and just a dumb amount of money is going to come in and try to do that. The problem is that Microsoft and other companies have already tried to do this to some extent, and they haven't necessarily succeeded on all fronts. Although Microsoft is finding its way in different ways, if that makes sense at this point, versus where it was before, where it was more trying to compete 1-to-1 with Steam again. Maybe not the right approach, right? Maybe mix it up a little bit. Anyway, we're past time. This would be a really cool topic, I guess, as it turns out, as for another day. But yeah, I'm glad people got to enjoy Papers, Please. A cool game to bring up and just get to revisit again. And looking forward to continuing our game club monthly as we get a chance to here. And again, our next one is a short hike, and that will be about a month from now. I don't know exactly when. We'll announce when we get closer to it on Twitter and such. But yeah, check that out and check out the game if you get a chance to. And then Tiny Disaster, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I don't remember what we have going on upcoming.
Nothing.
You had suggested a second week off, so I'll put that in the chat.
Oh, that's right. So we're off next week.
And then mini reviews.
And then we're going to be on the following
with mini reviews. Yeah.
I may be driving to Seattle, so that's the one thing I'm pausing on, because I'm going to PAX that time. So we'll discuss. We'll figure this out, and we will have but we're still off for next week. I don't want to change it up. We'll stick with that. We'll go off next week, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do the following week. Maybe I'll force us to do a new time a week sooner than we thought. We'll figure it out. So catch you guys all next time. Bumpy, you can play us out. I'm just rambling at this point.
Better run it. No, I'm kidding. Let's go with the Family Guy.
Yep.
All right, folks. That's it. We'll see you guys when we see you. We'll update you as we can. Easiest, best way to figure out what's going on is probably through Twitter, which our Twitter handle is, I don't remember now.
Indie Bros so long. PR.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indie Bros PR.
Indie Bros PR, just like our Twitch.
Yep, same thing as Twitch, and that's where all the updates will be coming. So, take care. We'll either see you next week, the week after, or 3 weeks, or 100 years. Who knows? We'll see you later.
See you when we see you.
Bye.
We'll be back.